You good? Still not see that on here. Oh, here we go. Okay, well, we'd like to thank everybody to come out for our panel discussion this month. We appreciate everybody being out here. We appreciate our guests. We're actually bringing some people in from pretty far away this time. So just kind of give you guys a recap. Our first panel discussion, we went over business technology strategy, how to be able to use that technology to support your business or your organizational goals. Our last panel discussion, we went over cybersecurity and how to protect that technology and protect your organization through good cybersecurity practices. Both of those lead up to probably one of the more important, also probably one of the more frustrating topics that we're going to talk about today. And that's really how to protect both your customer, whatever you call them, whether it's customer, patient, client, how to protect them, how to protect yourself through compliance. And we hear scary words, don't we? We hear, SOC 2 compliant. Are you HIPAA compliant? Are you PCI compliant? GLBA, NIST. I mean, they're all scary words that most people don't understand. So we're bringing you some of the best people that I know, and some of them are coming from, like I said, quite a bit away. So today, let me introduce our panel guests here. We have Jenny Barnes. Jenny's with a company called HostMy, but Jenny has a very long history of dealing with some organizations. Jenny, go ahead and introduce yourself. Give us a couple minutes and background.
Absolutely. I'm Jenny Barnes. I'm the government channel manager for HostMy. And I've worked with government probably for decades. I'll say 25 years plus in a number of roles. So compliance is near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel today.
Well, like I said, thank you again. Jenny's coming from all the way over in Tennessee, so it's quite a bit of ways. Our other panelist here, more local, John Nolan. Go ahead and introduce yourself a bit.
Okay, well, my name's John Nolan. I work with a company called Thrivent Financial. It's a Fortune 500 financial management company. Been with them for 12 years now. And anyway, compliance is always premium with what we do, with the kind of things we deal with, and the dealing with clients' monies and insurances and things like that. So yeah, we'll have an interesting conversation.
Well, and like I said, I appreciate you guys coming in and being here and part of this. Just kind of, so, let's kick it off. Compliance. Everybody hears the word. I don't think most people really understand what that means. So what is compliance? In the environment of local business, what does compliance mean?
Well, at least in my industry, playing by the rules. We are fiduciaries, which means we're obligated to act in the client's best interest, and really kind of living the golden rule, which luckily isn't too hard. But we have the SEC and FINRA and a lot of regulatory agencies looking over our shoulder at all times when you're dealing with people's retirement plans and all their monies and things like that. So we're very conscientious about doing things the correct way. And I always look at our compliance department like they're there to help keep me out of trouble in case I don't quite do things correctly. They're always right there to help. So
excellent. Jenny, what's compliance? I mean, in business today, in government today, in that environment, what does it actually mean to beyond checking boxes? What does it actually mean?
Right. Well, first of all, there is no one in a board meeting that's going to say, I want to spend 2 or 3 hours talking about compliance, talking about policy, procedure, governance, risk management. No one's going to want to talk that talk until the auditor walks in the room and they're glad there's a ransomware attack. And then they're glad to have that compliant discussion. So for me, I actually look at it in a totality with GRC. Governance, which is just think of the old governors on trains or on cars. It sets that strategy. It sets those controls. Risk management and then compliance. And for me, compliance really comes down to some legal standpoints, what's required of me to comply with. But I have to look at GRC as a whole. You have to look at totality. You cannot silo this or you're going to have blind spots.
Excellent. So John, for a CEO or an owner, I mean, you deal with a lot of business people in the finance side.
Mhm.
For that owner, that decision maker in business that's in the audience, what are the real risks of getting compliance wrong?
Well, in my world, we are independent contractors, so I do own my own business with this. If I get it wrong, there's serious financial penalties, not little ones, and loss of license and, quite frankly, jail time. So, making sure I'm doing things the right way, there's no option. And I'd rather be overprotected than underprotected.
So, Jenny, maybe you should grab this one, but is compliance now a universal requirement, or are there still businesses that can operate with kind of minimal oversight? Is it for everybody, or what does that look like?
Jenny's opinion is it is universal and everyone has to look at compliance. If you're doing any type of data collection, if you're doing anything digitally, which we all are, in my opinion, it's essential. And back to John's point, just to expand a little bit, I can tell you the financial liabilities from a government perspective can be huge. We had, for example, a small county, an E911 compliance issue with the Ray Baum Act. And they actually sent a drowning victim's call to another state. The child ultimately passed away. There was a $40 million lawsuit. Damages were $8 million. Standpoint in the healthcare industry, you're going to look at financial penalties. 2025, I was 6.6 million in fines. I know of 2 cases in the last 10 years or so that were awarded 5.5 million each because of HIPAA violations. And then you also have to look at those proposed HIPAA security rules that are coming. So lots of implications. In my mind, it truly is essential for everyone.
Agreed.
Please feel free to disagree with me.
No,
Yeah.
You're fine. I agree 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we had a company fairly close by that had the regulators show up unannounced into their office. And by the end of the day, the entire office was closed down. And every single person in that office lost their license and paid substantial fines. And they didn't warn you they were coming in. They just showed up because they were messing up and not doing the things that they should have done. And it cost them the entire business, and they could never practice in the industry again, which, quite honestly, I was fine with. Good. Like all industries, there's good and bad. And I'd rather see in this industry, I'd rather see people weeded out for doing the wrong thing. I have no problem with that at all.
And the business themselves, they're in jail, but what does it cost their client? What does it cost for shady practices, for, doing things the wrong way? If you're not regulating yourself, then, that client has to deal with that too.
Mm-hmm.
How many people do we know that lost their retirement because they invested with somebody? I think the word Ponzi scheme is pretty universal out there. People know what that is anymore. Back in the day, you didn't.
Yeah.
You trusted somebody. I have family members that trusted somebody and put majority of their retirement with them on this great deal. And, to this day, they're still working because they can't retire now.
Yeah.
It's horrible effects all the way around, but I think you're right. I think those that are willing to play loose and quick, and it's probably better that they're not in there anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think for most business owners too, realistically, if you step back and look at what you want the reputation of your business to be, I think the word ethical is a really good thing to have attached to your business, that you do business the right way, you're fair, you're honest, and things like that. That's how you build a long-term business. If you start to, fudge or not do things correctly, you're probably not going to be in business real long. And there's actually a couple instances I saw today just in some homework I was doing of things nearby that people just, were being shady on stuff that, and the hard part was, I mean, we're probably talking overall about eight to $10,000, and they're now, there's litigation going on, and they're probably going to jail for $8,000.
Yeah.
Really? That doesn't seem very smart.
So, I mean, compliance overall, though, when you hear the word compliance, people it's not something people like to hear. It's a necessary evil. That's the mind frame that's around it. So at what point should a leader think about compliance differently? At what point should they think differently as they scale from startup and establish, that when they're trying to get that business to grow, we're all in business trying to get it to grow. But at what point should they change their I guess, point of view when it comes to compliance? Jenny, what do you think?
I will tell you, executive leadership is absolutely, and if you're a startup, really build that compliance in on the front end. If you're in the middle of it, I can give you an example. I chair a nonprofit, and I compliant in a number of issues. It was absolutely the most important I could do as the chair of that board to make sure we started implementing policy and governance within that nonprofit. So for me, what I see is just the ability for executive leadership to drive it and make it a discipline within the entire business model. So in my mind, everyone is accountable. The leadership has to be accountable to set the strategy. The operations team has to be accountable for the controls. IT is responsible for the technical components. Every single employee, and it comes from a training perspective and a cultural top down. This is important. This is how we run our business. That's just my 2 cents.
I agree. I think that tone comes from the top down. It's a leadership setting that culture of taking care of our business, taking care of our clients through a really good position on compliance and cybersecurity in the end. But when we look at the market, I mean, John, your book of business is pretty diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Which industries do you see that compliance is becoming, growing quickly, or the quickest that compliance is becoming the issue, or becoming more of an issue?
Well, I think they all are. Obviously, the medical fields and things like that, but they've had standards for a long time that are fairly strict. Our industry, because of what we're dealing with, we have to follow all the HIPAA regulations, as well as all the financials, and because it's so, is such a target for fraud, that if people are trying to hack into a business and get past the security walls and try and get into what we're doing, I mean, billions upon billions of dollars sitting there, and sadly, that's the motivation for a lot of people. So, I think it's kind of stepping back a little bit, just building in the compliance right from the get-go is going to make it a lot easier. You just make it part of your culture that this is how it's going to operate, and start right from the get-go, and then it's not an issue of trying to, play catch up with it. And I think it's a smart way for a business to handle things.
I agree. And I mean, when it comes to compliances, there's only a couple of them I can think of that your industry doesn't hit.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a lot there that people need to know. It's scary, it's unknown. But I think you're right. I think it is growing in a lot of those industries. People don't realize that your business, doesn't matter what it is, parts of it, if you're dealing with any pieces of information, whether it's identifying to somebody, whether it's their credit information, whether it's healthcare information, I mean, there is a regulatory set of rules that you have to
Mhm.
follow. So, you know, Jenny, what's the most common compliance failures that you see?
I would say the first thing I hear all the time is we're too small. No one's going to come regulate us. No one's going to come try to attack us. No, we run under the radar. And I think that's one of the biggest misses in terms of compliance. You can be small and still be hit with a tremendous penalty. You can be small, you could be a small local government, take years to build public trust. You talked about ethics and being ethical. For me, the term is trust. And you have to build that citizen trust, but you can lose that in a second. So yeah, again, that's my take on where we are today, just in terms of most people think they're too small, or they're just not in an area that someone could actually go and look and see what they're doing.
No, I mean, I would agree. And you know what? The facts follow you. The last numbers that I had seen was just under half of cybersecurity attacks, and I believe we covered that this last month. But just under half of those are these small businesses. I mean, they can hit a lot of things there. But John, what do you think? Where do you think the biggest failures are?
Well, I think on what Jenny said, you know, the small businesses are typically an easier target than the big ones. I mean, with all it takes me about a full 10 minutes before I could get logged into my computer through all the different steps that I have to go through just to get tapped into the information I need. So that's going to be a lot harder than a small business who might not, you know, say have people like you that have come in and put the firewalls in. I know actually when you guys put the new router and modem in the office, we sat there after it came in, and within the first 30 minutes, we'd had 1,300. You probably know the term, but hits onto our IP address trying to hack into our system. You know, it was like 1,300 in a half hour. It was insane how fast it was going, and it was from all over the world. So a small business who's not doing that stuff is probably just an easy target, far easier target than a corporation like I work for.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, you're not off the radar. You're a prime target. Would be my advice.
Well, you know, that actually it's a great point. So how does cybersecurity issues lead to compliance issues?
Well, if anything gets hacked into, I mean, one of the things they tell us, if we don't have notes and documentation on what we're doing, it didn't happen. We have to do documentation trails, and that's where luckily there's some tools coming on that are making it easier for us to do that. But yeah, the compliance and the protection on that is, yeah, it takes a few minutes, but it's getting a lot easier.
Yeah. No, I agree. Jenny, what do you think? Where does cybersecurity lead to compliance issues?
They go hand in hand. There is absolutely no question. For example, in HIPAA, I did some research in terms of those fines with that 5.5 million. The bulk of those penalties were around cybersecurity failures. Very simple fixes that folks just missed. So cybersecurity is, I keep saying the word absolutely because I'm so passionate about the fact you've got to nail this down. And when you look at what's coming with AI and governance and security there, it's really important to make sure that everything you have, you're protected as much as possible. I would say it's not a question of when, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. When are you going to get hit?
Yeah. No, I agree. And, you know, just before we went live on this, you know, John, you were talking about a couple of these issues, real world situations where, being compliant could have been an issue. For like your industry, I can't text you and say, John, make that trade for me. Or, hey, John, I want to move my money from one place to the next. I can't leave you a message. But I mean, give us a real world scenario of, people that that try, I mean, you become friends with the people that
Mhm.
you're handling their money, you're
Yeah.
handling their livelihood, you're
Mhm.
handling their future.
Yeah.
So give us a real world situation where, that you run into that.
Well, the easiest one that I can think of was when I was early in my career, and you're kind of overwhelmed with everything. But I had a couple that I'd been dealing with for about a year or two, and he called me up one morning about 10 o'clock and started asking me questions about things, and started asking me all about his accounts, and then started asking me about his wife's accounts. Well, even if I know they're married, whatever, without her permission, I am not allowed to talk to him about anything they have unless it's a joint account. Um, he had his IRAs and things like that and money there, and she had hers. And I told him, I said, well, you'll need to have her call me and give me permission to talk to you about that. Well, he's like, oh, okay, well, whatever. And he hangs up and we go on with the day. Well, about an hour or two later, she called and it was almost the same exact question. She's asking about her stuff and being all friendly, and then said, well, and what does so and so have on his side? And I was like, same thing. I called a big timeout and finally said, okay, what's going on? Because I just got off the phone with him an hour ago, and turns out divorce proceedings. And they were each looking to clean each other's account out.
Oh,
And that wouldn't have gone over very well. And that, quite frankly, could have cost me my job and fines and penalties in a bad way. And I was like, wow, that was, glad the compliance rules were there, because I don't want anybody to get screwed over for anything.
yeah. So that, I mean, following those compliances kept you safe,
Yep.
kept the other party safe on
Hmm.
both parties.
Yeah.
But I mean, so that's really the compliances, as much as, like I said, as much as they're that grudging love-hate relationship,
Hmm.
that really does protect everybody that's involved.
Hmm.
We hear HIPAA compliance all the time. You can't go to the doctor without signing at least 3 papers that are in that packet. This is HIPAA compliance, and it's one of those that, in the end, your healthcare information it's important that it stays with you. It doesn't get sold. It doesn't get sent out there. So those are regulatory things that we hear all the time. Jenny, what's a real life situation for you where compliance has been, kind of saved you, or you're seeing real life scenarios where compliance was needed?
I'm seeing still local governments. When I say operational disruption, they can be shut down. Agencies truly shut down due to a ransomware attack. And I've seen some cases where they had enough backup, they were able to get up within 24 hours. But I've seen an agency take weeks and end up paying a $4 million ransom to be able to get up and running. Just a couple of examples that popped in my head. So again, from my standpoint, back to cybersecurity, you have to be vigilant and you have to be smart. And some of it is really just the basics, the blocking and tackling, the patching, finding the right vendor that can make that happen for you. But for me, in the local government space and in the healthcare space, with HIPAA, I continue to see HIPAA violations. Not only will you have those fines from the federal government, but you are certainly liable for civil litigation as well. So between disruption and fines and penalties and civil, it makes sense to pay attention now. Don't wait. Don't wait until someone files that lawsuit.
Yeah, no. The average cybersecurity attacks going to cost a company about 1.8 million.
Wow.
They don't realize that, even in a small business. But you realize that in a HIPAA situation, every incident is a $25,000 fine. So if somebody gets into a file and they find a bunch of that information, that compiles. I mean, if I get 4 incidences on one patient, that's $100,000 per patient. How many patients are in a doctor's office, in a dentist's office, those compile, and I mean, it's devastating.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, looking at that, so in your opinion, I mean, I know we've done a lot with your network in there, and Jenny, start thinking about this. Because I'm gonna ask you this too, but What's the most important cybersecurity framework or standards that a business should be aware of right now?
Well, for us, it's, I think, making sure that nobody can break into our framework. Make it as absolutely hard as possible. I mean, I've had clients sit in front of me while I'm trying to get my computer open, and I'm like, let's go make coffee while we're waiting, because it's not going to be fast to get in there. And, and sometimes they look annoyed, and I say, you understand, this is for your protection. This is so it's not easy for anybody to get in there. So, so for us, it's making sure our firewalls are up and that nobody's getting in.
Right. I mean, and me, if I was going to be a hacker or one of these bad actors that are out there, if I'm going to go up against your firewall, and I run into all of those stops, and then I turn around and I run into the office next door, who just showed up, plugged in their computer, and said, "Let's go." Mm-hmm. I'm going to get into that guy's computer.
Right.
So it's a very good point. Jenny, what do you think?
I agree with John. I think it's really important to have a framework, whatever that is, and standards. And there's lots of them out there. I like NIST. I like to follow some of the NIST procedures. I think as long as you can find yourself HIPAA compliant, for example, I work with a company, HostMy, and all of our products are HIPAA compliant throughout our systems. So I think that's also one, even if you're not in the healthcare industry, if you'll look at that, I think that's a great framework to say, here's my go-to, here's my standard, and set the bar there. I also think it's really important, and it's right now, it's not a requirement, but with the new HIPAA security rules that should be out this year, I'm expecting MFA to be required, multi-factor authentication. And I think that's something you need to look at throughout the organization. Where is it, and what can you do to make sure everything is MFA?
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. No, I'm the same. Well, like I said, we have multi-factor authentication. I'm really glad that I work for a corporation that has all the security and background, because even when we send emails, they get flagged instantly. I'm not sure how all of it works behind the scenes, but if I send an email that carries any personal information, whether it be a contract number, a social security, any personally identifiable information, our email system will stop it dead in its tracks and not let it go through regular email unless we're onto a secure system, which we have. And, if I forget, they stop it dead in its tracks and it doesn't go anywhere. And I'm grateful for that, because I always think, what if I'm on the other end of that? What if I'm the guy whose information is getting out there and something happens? So I'm really grateful that we have that set up.
It's terrifying. I mean, just earlier this year, there was a gentleman that I was talking to. It's a business owner. He got a notice that there was a website out there with his name, his wife's name, a complete bio. And so he started digging into it, and it turns out that, he also had a $100,000 line of credit for his business that he never started. It's one of those where he has no clue where that came from.
Right.
It could have been one of those where something as simple as an MFA, having to put in that odd code with add a symbol and add a number and add a capital and, all of those, but they get so frustrated with that. So, I mean, most organizations overestimate their cyber preparation, their cybersecurity readiness. They overestimate how compliant they actually are, because, I mean, we're human beings, right? I mean, we get to the point that it becomes tedious, and so we start going, maybe I don't have to do that.
Well, and I think a good question then for the business owner or the company to ask themselves, for this minor inconvenience, is it worth losing my business? Right. Because that's what it's going to end up being for a lot of scenarios like that.
Could be.
For what the fines are, and your customer confidence is gone. Social media now knows that you screwed up bad. And now you have to try and rebuild a reputation. Lack of compliance could cost you your business.
Yeah.
And so for a little bit of time, it's definitely worth it. It's cheap insurance.
I agree. One of the biggest misconceptions too, though, is that if you need cybersecurity, you don't need Fort Knox. I mean, just because you
Right.
have to have it doesn't mean I have to lock everything down. It could mean that I just need, whatever the compliances that I have to have, whatever you find out what that means and meet those. But at what point, I mean, financially, at what point do we find a balance, or how do we find a balance between, cybersecurity and what's versus, what is actually needed for my business?
Well, everything's going to be different on that. I think one of the easy things that I would look at is what lets you put your head on the pillow at night and be confident that you're protected. That's going to be different for everybody, but I wouldn't want to lose my business. Like I said, it takes a long time to sign in, so I do, get in, start up the computer, and while it's doing its thing, I go make coffee and come back. But everybody's got to find their own on that, but make sure when your head's on the pillow at night, you're confident that nothing's going to happen to you. And
I agree.
That's everybody's bar for that is different.
It is. No, I mean, the guy that just got hacked is going to have a very sensitive spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the person that's been doing it for a while. And like,
Yeah.
So it's going to be two different ways. Jenny, what do you think?
I'm
How do
of
you
the
find that
opinion-
balance?
I really am of the opinion only the paranoid survive. So I tend to
Yeah.
let just a bit more toward cautiousness, but maybe because of my background and what I've seen and the true destruction of business. So I do lean that way. I will say that sometimes it is overkill. You need to make sure, do that first risk assessment in some way. Where are your risks? Understand what those are, and then figure out how to mitigate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you get hacked, you're going to be the hyper vigilant one. So I would encourage people to kind of think like, you've already been hacked. What did that mean? How much headache? How many months did it take you to get things right again? It can be an incredibly ongoing process that makes all the other stuff you had to do to be, secure, like no big deal anymore.
Yeah.
Once it happens.
And I mean, there are budgetary questions. So as a company grows, that financial side is going to be super important. So being able to keep it within the budget that you need to keep it in, but also keep it within the compliance. And I mean, I agree. You're going to have to overdo some things, because at some point at least for us, we are trying to outthink these guys.
Yeah. It's
and it's hard to do. So that's the limited resources. We really do have to play that balanced game. But there are levels where you have to hit at least that minimum viable, what you have to have to be able to keep going, and then figure out what more you can have. And that extra, nobody was ever super sad about adding, a bio feature, read my face and my thumbprint,
Right.
as well as my PIN number.
Yeah.
That works out pretty well in the end. So with this, when we're building these, going back to the compliance side, how important is the leadership buy-in in making sure that compliance becomes successful in the business? We can set the standards and we can say, this is how it's going to be, and I can lead that way. But how important is it that the leadership actually has buy-in and not just telling people how it goes?
Well, they're the ones that set the bar. And, I'm a big lead by example fan, that if they're not doing it, the company's probably going to be slack on it. And, it starts at the top. You make it a priority, you build it into your mission statement, whatever you've got to do. And then it's just part of the culture. And it's not hard, as long as you just get used to it. Like a lot of things, just get used to doing it the correct way.
Yeah, I agree. Jenny, what do you think?
Completely 100% agree. It has to start from the top. And I will say, if you have a leader who hasn't bought in, then it's your job to sell them on the importance and criticality. So, because I have seen leaders who really, I don't want to say they stick their head in the sand, but they don't believe it can happen to them. So if you've got a leader like that, show them they want to learn, but it truly has to start from the top down, or you got to go top and then start trickling it throughout the organization.
I agree. No, I mean, we could set the line. We can draw that line in the sand. And as soon as that person walks in your office and sees that, you didn't put in an MFA,
No.
you didn't have to set that up. Why do I have to?
Mm-hmm.
Or, that document that's all over the table with, the HIPAA information, and that the next patient comes in and they're still sitting there. That type of example goes a long way to destabilize that culture that's, compliance and keeping things safe. So let's look at the future. Technology wise, we all have, the paper trail and all that. I don't know if that's going to go away too quickly, but it's moving that way.
Mm-hmm.
So where does technology and automation come into managing compliance effectively?
Well, if we relate back to my business, is that, like I said, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So for us, the technology, the AI, where we can have it record the meeting, summarize the meeting for it. We go back in and make sure everything that AI summarized for us is correct and what we need on there. And what I'm finding is that I'll still have to go back in and add stuff, correct stuff, and make sure that that's done correctly before I put that into the notes. And our system, once you put in notes, you have 24 hours to make any edits you need. And once that 24 hours is done, it's locked in there. You can't change it. So, that's good. It holds us accountable on our end to make sure we get it correct. We can put new notes in at a later date, but it locks the system from us changing that. I think the AI is going to help make it really efficient to do it. But you're still going to have to babysit the AI a little to make sure it really is what you need.
Agreed. Jenny, what do you think? What role is AI and automation going to impact, or how's that going to impact compliance?
I have so many thoughts here. First of all, I completely agree, John. The error rate, and depending on whether you're using OpenAI, ChatGPT, or Claude, and what you're doing, the error rate is anywhere from 5 to 12% on those today. So you definitely have to police that. But in my opinion, we're rolling out AI so quickly without any governance, without any compliance forethought. I think you really have to step back and, number one, draw up an AI policy. And you've got to start putting that governance and security controls in place now. You need to make sure you think about employee privacy, client privacy, lots of things around that. What is that OpenAI going to deliver? Where are they going with this? So I've got a lot of thoughts there. I also am very interested in Mythos and Project Glasswing. If you're not familiar with that, Anthropic opened up to about, I want to say 100, 150 partners, the Amazons, Apples, Broadcoms of the world. So they've opened up this incredible AI technology that can truly detect vulnerabilities in a split second. Vulnerabilities everyone is missing. So now you cannot let that get in the wrong hands. That's why they've opened it up to very specific partners to help them troubleshoot. But I want to say it was Jen Easterly, who's the CISA CEO, who said it's the end of cybersecurity as we know it. I don't know if that's true, but I know that AI security is going to change the game, and we have to be vigilant there.
I agree there. It was just last year that one of the bigger AI backed cybersecurity companies was able to find and identify the first case of malware, AI powered malware. That was just this last year. And so, I mean, seeing that and having AI be the form of attack, that's how within the few minutes you had 1,300 attacks.
Yeah.
As opposed to, back in the day when these guys were trying to do it and they had to type it in, you might get, 5 or 6 an hour, or 5, maybe some of it's fast, might have a few a minute, but 1,300.
Yeah.
That is,
and that was a few years. That was a few years ago. That was about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
At this point. And so it's just advanced. And this is really a question for you. When we talk about the hackers and things, we build the firewalls, we build all this, but the hacker's job is to sit back there and figure out ways to get around it. And a lot of times we don't know to block this because we never thought something could come that way. How's that going to translate now with AI working on stuff like that? That's, to me, a very concerning question, that it's going to have good uses, but also potentially bad.
Right. Well, I mean, consider too our field of perception. I mean, it's about what you could swing your arms around and see. That's what we see, and that's what we know is real around us right now. As we go and we learn, we get more. But imagine something that has a neural network that's worldwide. So when those attacks start coming over in Europe, or those attacks start coming over in the East Coast or the city next to us, as those come in and they become identified within the AI neural network.
Okay.
And so when you have something that is an AI-backed cybersecurity that is now learning that fast, oh, that one got identified over there, so I'm going to watch for that now, and I'm going to watch for this now, and it starts looking for trends.
Okay.
When they look at it and they say, okay, some of those and some of the cybersecurity that's out there right now that's in your firewall is looking at it going, John does these actions all the time. And so it sees that and says, okay, generally you're going to come into your office 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to check your emails, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and you're going to do those every day. Well, if all of a sudden John's checking his email at 1:30 in the morning from your office, well, that's not normal.
Yeah.
So flag.
Okay.
AI is going to realize that doesn't match your pattern.
Okay.
And so then AI systems will capture that and let us know. So the more that these guys are putting out there, the more AI is learning. And like I said, worldwide neural network, it's learning all of them, and we're battling it back with AI. So
nice.
Those combined are going to work very well together. But no, I mean, there's a lot that's out there. It's never going to slow down. I think Jenny hit it on the head. There's so much out there. I don't know that it's the death of cybersecurity, but it's definitely going to be a change.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have to be, and it's going to be a continual change. I mean, the rate at which the amount of knowledge in the world is changing is less than a week at this point, because there's so much change and so much that's moving. It's insane. With something that, we grew up watching it as a sci-fi thriller, and we're going, no, RoboCop's a thing.
Yeah, the Jetsons were right about everything.
So it's crazy. But that brings us, our last two questions for you guys. Again, I thank you so much for your guys' time. Jenny, I know it's super late where you are, but what separates, let me ask you this question and then one follow-up. What separates companies that handle compliance well from those that struggle?
Go ahead, Jenny. Why don't you start with that one?
The first thing that comes to mind with that question is choosing the right partners. Whether it's IdeaCom, ECSI, someone who truly understands the landscape. For example, back to this AI, because it is front and center and in my mind all the time. HostMind developed this voice AI product. One of the things we can do with that is actually record calls to ensure compliance. For example, we've got a practice management company, so they have to record calls. We make sure, and they didn't want to put a recording on there that said yours is being called. They have an older client base, and they didn't want to do that. They were seeing folks hang up. So they tell them, but we can actually, with that recording and semantic alerts, truly understand who's doing that compliance piece and what that patient is feeling as they're calling you. So choosing the right partner is critical. That's my plug for HostMind and our voice AI product. In addition, I think it's just someone who builds it into the process and understand it's more than just checking the box. It's more than the penalty. It truly is building that trust, whether it's local government. As long as you understand that, you're going to be at the forefront.
I agree. So, it really is. It really is about trust. Our clients come to us because they trust us.
Mm-hmm.
If your clients didn't trust you with their money,
yeah,
they would not be sitting in front of you and writing you
No.
checks and telling you where to put their money.
No.
I mean, that's a really great point. So if you could give one piece of advice to every business owner, here in attendance, those that are going to watch this later on, but about compliance, what would it be?
Well, like I said earlier, my thought is that once it happens to you, you will be sorry you weren't more compliant. At least, the regulatory agencies looking over our shoulders, they're not nice if we screw up. So to me, it's great protection. It's great insurance. We have an internal compliance portion of our company that follows us because I don't want to hear from the real guys.
Right.
So our compliance guys are in place to protect us and make sure we're doing it right the first time. And, in 14 years, 13 years, I've never had to deal with that. So I'm fine with that.
Now that's a good point. Jenny, any last thoughts?
Completely agree with that. My first comment was no one wants to talk about compliance. But so the one piece of advice I would give you is talk about compliance. And my follow-on would be, if you don't want to talk it and you don't know it, find the right partners who understand compliance and can help you and guide you on your journey.
Right. No, I appreciate that. No, I agree. I think in the end, all of this conversation, everything boils down to, most, if not all businesses have some level that of compliance that they need to be following or at least be aware of. And really the difference is going to be education.
Yeah.
Spend the time, become a student of your industry, become a student of the requirements that you need to follow. Say, I mean, like you were saying, it's going to save your business. It's going to save your customers. Jenny, you hit it on the head. It's a trust issue. But being able to show your clients, your patients, your customers, that you care enough about them to keep their information safe, but also you and your staff to be able to show that you care enough about your business and those that work for you and stake their livelihood on working with you, that you're willing to protect that too with the compliance and you're willing to go take the time to be educated.
Yeah.
So in the end, it does boil down to trust. But
yeah, and one of the things I'd add to that, in the world of social media that has become very prevalent, I think anybody that ever had to deal with it from a business for your reputation, if you screw up one time, it's going to be on social media somewhere, whether it's Yelp or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. You screw up one time, it's out there. And that's going to be the thing that pops up most. You can have 30 really phenomenal things. Nobody puts it out there for you. People are much more likely to complain than they are to compliment your business. And all it takes is one screw up and you're everywhere on social media. And that's going to cost your business a lot. It's going to cost your reputation.
I agree. Absolutely agree. No, I mean, there's a lot to learn now, and there's a lot more that's going to be coming, and it's going to continue to be coming. So, no, guys, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys again for your input, and we thank everybody for coming and listening, and hopefully what we've been able to talk about. Feel free to ask questions. We'll answer to the comments. Other than that, you guys have a